Hello, Blackhawks fans, and welcome into Four Feathers Podcast. It's Tony Marchese alongside Steve. Steve, we've got a lot of great Blackhawks topics to talk about today. Before we do, I'll read off the usual promos here. Make sure you're following the show at Four Feathers Podcast on X. You can follow Steve at Dirty Third 81, myself at Tony on Tap. You can find all of our written work over at ontapsportsnet.com. Steve, it's been a rough week or so of hockey, but the Blackhawks youth movement is here, and that's, I think, going to be a large topic of focus on today's episode. But before we get into all of the great hockey things that we're going to talk about, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing good. It's nice and sunny over here in California. It's not getting super hot yet, so that's what we're kind of waiting on because it's going to get like 115 in a few weeks. So that'll be fun. Not looking forward to that. But yeah, the White Sox got a win today, so I know you're excited. I'm happy.
They did.
So
Yes.
Yeah, man. How are you doing?
You know, that White Sox winner today was excellent. We had some decent hockey over the weekend. I was in attendance for a Ryan Donato hat trick. We'll talk about that. That made me happy. I wish I walked out of the UC with a win, but seeing a Sox win today, was that opening day last week for the White Sox as well. Got to see a win there. It's good. There's wins happening in my life for my sports teams, and that's what makes me happy, Steve. I don't know if it makes you as happy as it makes me, but I definitely enjoy watching winning sports. It's a rarity in Chicago, and it's great to have, a couple of these wins trickling in. We got some people here already. I am Skoke says, dudes. Skoke, what's up? Glad you're here. Daniel Barry, Sports Highlights. Yo, what's going on, Daniel? Hope you're doing well. You guys can comment throughout the show. We'll feature some comments, ask some questions. We'll do all that type of fun stuff. Steve, a mixed bag from our Chicago Blackhawks. So I know I'm happy because we've seen some wins. Not all of those wins have come from the Chicago Blackhawks. I think they need a couple more. They're sort of riding a rough week here. I know last time we talked with everyone, it was Friday the 21st, and since then they've lost to the St. Louis Blues. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers in a rout 7-4 on that Sunday in a back-to-back. That was a great game there on that Sunday. A lot of offense from the Blackhawks. It was kind of an open shootout style matchup. I want to talk a little bit about that game because you had some thoughts on Anders Sorensen's coaching system and different gameplay strategies that I want to get into. Then they lose to the New Jersey Devils. They get beat by the Knights. Ryan Donato has a hat trick in that game, and then they fall to Utah. So a lot of losses, but I think the big thing here is the youth movement is here. Sam Rinzel, Oliver Moore, obviously eliminated from college contention there for the championship out that way, and make their way over to Chicago, right into the lineup. Our guy Ron Luce spoke that one into existence on the timeline the other day. That was pretty cool to see.
Yes, he did.
But we've got two new Blackhawks to break down, and I want to start right there, Steve, because I was so impressed with both of these young individuals putting on the Indian head sweater the other day. Steve, I need your initial takeaways from Sam Rinzel and Oliver Moore.
Dude, I'm pretty excited right now, even though we're kind of losing. And I just checked the standings. We're still just 2 points above San Jose. So some people are kind of like still riding the tank, are probably excited right now. But yesterday was like drinking fresh water in a desert. Just watching Sam Rinzel and then Oliver Moore too. Both of those guys, like you've heard so much about them for such a long time. And it kind of just like, even when I saw them get signed, I didn't really like it didn't really hit me until like we saw it on the ice. And especially with Rinzel, who like, for me personally, he blew my expectations out of the water. And then for Moore, like he looked awesome, but like, I don't know, I still have my reservations about Moore, but it's, you got to love what you see out there. And, for Hawks fans, I'd highly recommend just tuning into every single game. It's only like 9 or 8 left. It's fun hockey right now, even if they lose.
I think you said it really well there, Steve. It is fun hockey right now. And the reference to drinking water in a desert, that it's been a change this whole season. The evolution of the Chicago Blackhawks has been really fun to watch. It started the year, a lot of veteran presence throughout the lineup. Now we're sort of at a point in the year, Steve, where a lot of those veteran guys have lost ice time. They're not really part of the lineup anymore. Some have been moved. It's a very young lineup. I think they put a graphic out either yesterday or today. It was 6 former first round picks over like the last 2 or 3 years that are starting for the Chicago Blackhawks right now, and that includes Connor Bedard. So there's so much young talent that has now made its way to the NHL level. This isn't in Rockford. Korchinski's been called up. The whole blue line is all new faces outside of Connor Murphy on some nights, and it was there against Utah. Man, it's amazing to see, and the puck movement looks better. The legs look fresh. It just there's a little bit more of an energetic buzz to the team, and regardless if they're winning or losing, it's a much better product than what we witnessed last year, and probably up until this year's trade deadline, or at least a couple of weeks before it. And you can throw the addition of Spencer Knight as well on top of this as part of that youth movement too. I'm very happy right now as a Hawks fan. And the reason I'm happy is because there's no expectations for the rest of the season. You can kind of watch this, as you said, and just enjoy the growth of these guys and start to have some hope for the future. It finally feels like there might be just a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Oliver Moore, I'll get into that one. That kid's fast. I have my reservations on Oliver Moore as well, just like you do. However, I was impressed with the speed, and the speed alone looks like it can play at the NHL level for sure. I don't know about you, but that was my biggest takeaway from Oliver Moore.
Yeah, man, that dude was flying all over the ice yesterday. It was awesome. And like, kid's fast, and I think a lot of Chicago Blackhawks fans have some trauma to deal with from fast players that are kind of highly touted, Christopher Stieg. But like he looks like he's good. I think the concern with him is more of his skill, besides his speed. Like how good can he read the NHL game? So he's somebody that I think is going to absolutely benefit from time in Rockford. But yesterday that kid was fast, man. I loved it.
Yeah, I definitely think that he's a candidate to start the year in Rockford next season. Probably gets the rest of the year here with the Blackhawks, and then goes back down. Now, the other one that signed, Sam Rinzel, I don't see this kid going back to Rockford. That's just my thought after one game. Dude just looks like he could be a forward playing defense, and strong defense at that. But his puck handling skills, the movement, his ability to jump in on the blue line and fire shots at the net, that's something that Blackhawks fans are going to love over the next couple of seasons. Everybody wants to yell, shoot the puck. Sam Rinzel was not shy about shooting the puck in his NHL debut. Came close a couple of times, some really excellent scoring opportunities. Very encouraging stuff. Very encouraging stuff. I was shocked. I had not watched a lot of Sam Rinzel before. And on the broadcast, I believe it was Darren Pang had said one of the guys on Utah had called over to Connor Murphy and said, "Who the heck is that?" That's making impressions in your NHL debut. Do you see him going back to Rockford? Or do you think he's up here with the boys for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, dude. I was gonna ask you that actually, but it's like me personally, it's only one game, so you don't want to get like over excited about it. But like from what you could see yesterday, and it's not just the fact that he's shooting the puck a lot, it's he was reading the game so well. He knew where to be. The plays he made were calculated. There was a play where he stood up at the blue line, at Utah's blue line, forced a turnover, and then he brought the puck over into their offensive zone. And that's kind of higher level thinking right there from Rinzel. But for Davidson, he's been pretty strong on letting the kids kind of marinate. I think that's the term they're using. They're gonna cook down in Rockford. And like I see the reasoning behind that, especially with like how Stan Bowman kind of rushed a lot of prospects, notably defensemen, to the NHL. So for Davidson, he's like going to probably be a little bit more cautious. If I were Davidson, which I'm not, I would probably keep Rinzel at the NHL. That was going to be my ruffle some feathers, but yeah, I think cat's out of the bag. He should
I
stay.
stole that one. I stole that one early. I didn't know that was going to be your ruffle some feathers, so we're finding this out live on the show. But I think it's an important thing to talk about here because there's going to be a defensive roster crunch at some point next season. You're going to have, Artem Levchinov, who looks like he's probably sticking around. You've got Kevin Korchinski, who's done his year of marinating. You've got Wyatt Kaiser, who I think you and I texted a little bit about this yesterday. Wyatt Kaiser has quietly looked really freaking good. And I was not a huge Wyatt Kaiser guy at first. I think Ron was definitely more of a Wyatt Kaiser guy than I was, especially going into last season. But watching his play a little more closely over the past couple of weeks, he definitely deserves a spot on an NHL roster. You've got Ethan Del Mastro, who's had a pretty decent season so far. You're going to have Sam Rinzel in there as well. And then you've got a couple of other veterans that are in there. And here's another name, Nolan Allen. I did just mention Ethan Del Mastro. So there is not enough space for all of these young kids to all completely crack this lineup out of camp next year. It's going to be really interesting watching training camp and just how Kyle Davidson assembles this roster. Defenses, for the first time in my Blackhawks fandom, feels like it's not a problem going forward for the next 3 to 4 or 5 years. And I don't know if you feel the same way. I'm not sure that all of these guys are going to 100% work out. That's not what I'm saying. But there is definitely enough in the pipeline right now that it's not a concern. What are your thoughts there? Who's gonna early predictions? What's the blue line look like next year, Steve?
I think one of those prospects, maybe more, like maybe two of them, I think they might be included in a deal in the offseason. That might be Ethan Del Mastro. That could be Allen. A name that I've been seeing a lot of Blackhawks fans throwing around is Kevin Korchinski. That's a great way to kind of set me off in a pissed off mood. But I think, and just like real quick you're on
the Kevin Korchinski hype train, correct?
Like, I don't want to say hype because the kid is 20 years old. He played his first pro season as a hockey player in the NHL. He's got, I think, like 80 something games under his belt in the NHL. It takes like about 200 games for young defensemen to feel comfortable in the NHL. So for Korchinski, and why I like him a lot, is his offensive instinct, his skating. And I think what a lot we're seeing with him is the dude needs to put on size to get more physical. We saw it yesterday in Utah where he was defending Alex Kerfoot, and he was trying to cross-check him, and it was like a fly just bothering like a horse. Like Kerfoot wasn't bothered, and he ended up scoring anyways. So I think if Korchinski just puts on size, give him time, he'll work out, and he could be really good. But yeah,
he's still so young too, and with that NHL experience already, he's got some chemistry with some of these guys. I would hate to see Korchinski moved. I understand why people are talking about Korchinski being one of those guys, but at the same point in time, it is the cupboard is full, and Kyle Davidson's going to be able to move something and get something back of value. And hopefully it's something that helps out on the offensive side. Because while we're talking about how great all of these defensive prospects are, and it's awesome that we have all of this youth, there's definitely a deficit when it comes to our forward group. And I think that we can all agree that Connor Bedard, and we've talked about this all year, Connor Bedard needs scoring help. You need to have more of an offensive game. I'm still in. We should have drafted Ivan Demidov camp, although Levchinov looks good as well. But I'm an offensive minded guy here, Steve. I like seeing goals be scored by the Chicago Blackhawks. I love when the Chelsea Dagger plays. That's what I like. And we need more goal scoring. So it'll be interesting to see which one of these guys gets moved. I don't like the idea of trading Korchinski. However, if that's something that goes on to help the Chicago Blackhawks become a team that is a playoff contender again, I don't know if I lose too much sleep over it. That's just the way the cookie kind of crumbles.
Yeah, man. I think for me too, it's like I think we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves too. I want to wait just to see where we fall in the draft lottery. Like if we get the number one pick again, like that might change things because of Schaefer, a defenseman, and that's a whole nother rabbit hole that that.
Could you see them moving that? Could you see them moving that number one pick this summer? If they get it,
I think it would make sense to do it. The thing is you don't really see that in the NHL a whole lot.
No,
because because like right now, like I don't even know. I don't want to call him the consensus number one, but Matthew Schaefer is a defenseman, and the Hawks don't really need one right now. So if you do trade that number one pick to like somebody who wants a defensive prospect, you could get a huge return from it. But I would be very surprised if that happened.
I would too. I know the name there is Misa for the Hawks up there, and as far as a forward goes, but if you get the number one pick and there's value to extract from it, you could always move things around. I don't know. Kyle Davidson's been very crafty with some of these, just movement of draft picks, especially. So I'm going to just toss that out there because I think it would kind of stink to get the number one pick and then just, I don't know, pass him down. You know what I mean? Just pass Schaefer down it just feels sort of like you're giving a gift to someone else because you're drafting from positional need instead of taking the best available talent. And it leaves me feeling a little weird about doing so. But the Hawks are at a point where they do not need another defenseman in this system at this very moment. It just doesn't really fit. We're already talking about how it doesn't fit right now. And depth is good. Don't get me wrong. Depth is good. And I enjoy the fact that there's enough depth, but I don't know. Maybe I'll be happy with a number 2 overall pick again this year.
Yeah, man. And like, who knows? Maybe we get the number 1 next year because we're not going to be good next year. So, it's going to be rough.
Stop talking like that. Stop talking like that.
It's true.
I want onward and upward, not stagnant. No, it's fun hockey to watch right now, and a lot of that is because of the youth. But dude, Steve, I really honestly hope this team takes a step forward out of the basement, like they said they were going to do this year, and that happens next year. And offense is going to get that a little bit closer, and it hasn't been good. Speaking of offense, and someone that has been good though, Ryan Donato scores his first career hat trick the other night. I believe that was his 30th goal of the season, Steve, if I'm correct there. He might be at 29. It could have been 30.
His 29th.
29th. So here's a 30 goal scorer. He obviously the details around his contract offers from the Hawks has come out. They've been made public. Do you think that he is starting to price himself out of and the Hawks have a ton of money. Do you think that Ryan Donato is beginning to price himself potentially out of what Kyle Davidson's willing to spend to keep Ryan Donato here? And just thinking out loud, this is a contract year for a guy. He's played really well in Chicago. He's been a top line forward basically all season, and I just wonder, did we not screw the deal up by not getting it done at the deadline? But is there a possibility that he plays himself somewhat out of Chicago by the end of the season?
Okay, so before I share my thoughts on that, did you listen to the Daily Face-Off episode today with Frank Saravalli?
I have not yet.
Okay, so I'm sorry if I'm going to piss you off. Get ready.
You're gonna piss me off. Let's go. Let's hear it.
So Frank Saravalli was saying how there was contract talks with Donato, kind of like what everybody was like heard about, where it was somewhere in the ballpark of 3 years for just under $4 million, and then Donato turned it down. And Saravalli was basically speculating that could it be possible if Donato tries to find a contract around $5 million in the market. So, like that kind of had me worried just because of like who Frank Saravalli is. And like, he's pretty tied in with like the Blackhawks organization. So, obviously take all this stuff with a grain of salt. But for me, $5 million per year is like, it's something that's doable for the Blackhawks, and they're probably one of the few teams that could eat that. But in Donato's favor, if he's trying to get that much money, I don't think a lot of teams are going to be offering that to him. And that's what Frank was saying, was that $5 million is kind of steep for Donato because this is a career year for him. He's shooting at a 16% shooting percentage, which is absurdly high. His career average is like 10%. So his scoring is going to go down. So him asking for $5 million and then turning around $4 million, he's kind of shooting himself in the foot if he doesn't stay with the Blackhawks. And if he doesn't stay with the Blackhawks, I'm going to be a little pissed off that Kyle Davidson didn't get something done by the trade deadline, because that's an asset that you're letting walk away for nothing.
Right. And I mean, at the time, I was happy that he didn't move. I enjoy watching Ryan Donato play hockey. I'm just worried, and everything you just told me just raised off more alarm bells in my head. And part of the reason why is for a team that needs scoring, for a team that needs a guy that is somewhat of a fan favorite around the city of Chicago, like Ryan Donato is become sort of a Blackhawks household name now. To let him walk in free agency and go somewhere else with the amount of cap space that you have, it would somewhat be criminal to not be the ones that get pen to paper with Ryan Donato. And sure, Donato's camp probably doesn't want to move on anything until they reach the open market and probably get an offer that they can bring back to Kyle Davidson and say, this is what our player is worth on the open market. Can you match this? It's the business of sports, but it's ugly, it's dirty, and it feels bad, but could potentially, and I know the cap's going up, but squeezing the Hawks out of some extra resources that could be used elsewhere down the road. It's not like we're up against the cap or anything. However, it just, I don't know. I really find it hard to see him getting over $5 million. I don't know about you. I find it really hard, but maybe somebody out there is desperate and wants to get Ryan Donato on their team. I don't know. I know that I enjoy him here in Chicago. I think Anthony Tony's got it in here. $5 million for 2 years, 4.5 for 3. I find it difficult to get to that $5 million number, Steve. I don't know about you, even with the great performance this year.
Yeah, I mean, like for Donato, the selling point is going to be 4 or 5. If I think the ceiling would be $5 million, is that he's going to be playing on a first line probably next year, depending on the free agency situation. But he's going to be probably a top 6 player on the Blackhawks. He's not going to find that time or that playing time anywhere else in the league. So that's kind of the draw for Donato. The thing is like if 5 million is what Donato's asking for, that is a little steep. But like on the other hand, like the Blackhawks, like that's not even going to be a dent in their cap situation. Like they just like they have a guy who hasn't played in years on their roster technically, like in Shea Weber. So like
Right.
they had to reach the cap floor.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm hoping that this gets done before there's like rumors of Ryan Donato going elsewhere. It's just bad PR, I think, and it just doesn't need to happen. Hopefully Ryan Donato is back in a Blackhawks uniform. I'm hoping the contract would be around 2-3 years. That would be, I think, the perfect length. Again don't need. I don't see. I don't see 5 million for him, but maybe the Hawks can just overpay this one if they have to and help get to the cap floor. I'm not a PhD in salary cap geography like our guy Ron Luce is. So he might have some things to weigh in on this one in one of our next episodes. But Ryan Donato is definitely a guy that I think Kyle Davidson needs to lock up sooner rather than later. Steve, speaking of off-season decisions that are going to happen for the Chicago Blackhawks, there's a big one, and you posted something to X today that got some interesting responses and reactions to it. But I think it's true, and I think we need to talk just a little bit about it here. What did you say? You said the coaching decision and coaching hire that's going to be made this offseason is one of the most impactful things on this rebuild.
Yeah, I think this is going to be Kyle Davidson's most important decision of this rebuild. He has to get the coaching hire right because, he's been through technically, if you're including King, 3 inexperienced head coaches. In Richardson's case, I think he got dealt a bad hand. He's going to get another head coaching job down the road. He'll be fine. But Davidson, he's we kind of talked about before if like he's on the hot seat or not, but like he's kind of got to nail his next coaching hire. And it's not even just for his sake, it's really for all these prospects, because you're seeing it where like when they're all playing on the ice, you see all this skill and all this talent, but without the right direction, I don't want to say it's going to go to waste. It's going to get like mucked down in like frustration. And my fear, like worst case scenario, is like we, not to be the doom and gloom guy, but like we end up like the Buffalo Sabres where you have all these good players and then nothing happens until they get a new place of scenery. And I think a lot of that starts with the coach. And it's not just like having a coach that knows what to do, like with tactics and stuff. He'll be fine with that aspect, especially with like his assistant coaches and all that stuff. We need a head coach that can work with the young players. And, on like one end of the spectrum, you have like recently John Tortorella, who got fired from the Flyers. And a lot of people, I don't think a lot, but some people are saying like, oh, should the Hawks go get him? Hell no. One, he doesn't even want to come to a team like Chicago. He wants to go win. He's done rebuilding or like coaching for a team that's not winning. So that's automatically a disqualifier for him. And 2, like if he were to coach the Blackhawks, he would probably make Connor Bedard cry like every single day. And it wouldn't be good. And like you see it with Mitchkov, like as soon as Tortorella was fired,
you don't think Connor Bedard can handle working in Tort's system? That might be I might clip that one.
I don't think so. I think that would break Bedard.
That's not good.
No, but Mitchkov, I think like in the 2 games, I think that's how long it's been. Either way, he's got like I think 4 goals in a ridiculously amount of time. Like he's on fire right now. That's just from a coaching change. And then on the other end of that, you have like the inexperience where like Andrew Sorensen, who I think he's a really smart guy and he knows hockey. However, when it's like in the New Jersey Devils game where Connor Bedard, he gets like held down to the ground because he's holding on to Nemec's stick or whatever. And apparently Sorensen did get mad at the refs and he shouted at them. My point is like his lack of fire drew the attention of like not only like the fans, but I think I heard like Edzo was commenting on the national broadcast that like Sorensen needs to be more passionate and sticking up for his guys. And I agree with them. And even if the counter to that is, oh, well, he did bark back at the refs. Well, it's been a consistent theme where like a lot of the times where like there's these bullshit calls on the ice. Sorensen and the rest of his coaching staff too, you can watch them. They're just standing there with their hands in the pocket and like, oh, like if we argue with the refs, it's pointless because they're not going to change the rule anyway. Well, no shit, they're the refs. It's what they're supposed to do. But like you're sending a message to like Bedard that you have their back. And it's that passion and that fire that these kids need.
Yes, that is very well said. That's very, very well said. I agree wholeheartedly. I'm not saying that I love a coach that gets angry all the time and throws things, but I love a coach that gets angry all the time and throws things. You want that. People don't want to hear, the whole Joe Quenneville stuff. Some people do. I like it. But he was a guy that got angry and passionate about things. He instilled at least respect when he was on the bench, not only from his players, but from the referees, everybody around. Anders Sorensen's the complete opposite. Just the most quiet. He seems like the quietest guy. And he could be the smartest up-and-coming, head coach in all of hockey. However, that doesn't change the fact that you're an interim coach right now. You don't have respect from the league. You don't have respect from any of the NHL refs. You've got a pretty decent group of veterans in Nick Foligno and Pat Maroon who are around here and have some respect. But I see them get more angry than Anders Sorensen does. It just makes you wonder, like, what's that voice? I'm not going to say that Anders Sorensen isn't going to be, a long-time NHL head coach. Maybe he goes back to the AHL. Maybe he sticks around as an assistant. Seems like he's got a pretty decent hockey mind. I don't think that's up for debate. But what you said there about just showing the players that you have their backs, I think that matters. And I think it matters a little bit deeper into things within the system for guys who potentially want to come play here, for guys that are, prospective free agents when they're looking at the system and what they can expect. I don't think anybody's signing up right now to come play hockey for Anders Sorensen. And so when you talk about why the coaching hire is important, I want them to bring in an established veteran presence or somebody that NHL players are going to want to come play for. And it's not just because they're screaming and yelling or, getting pissed off when there's a bad call. I think it goes more into they need a vocal leader, not only, on the ice, but someone off of it as well to handle the media. And here's my thing with Anders Sorensen and what we've seen so far this year. He's not a good media guy. He's not delivering great quotes. He's not taking the attention off of the team. And so you're left with these storylines around Connor Bedard and how Connor Bedard hates it in Chicago. You want someone that's going to steal some of that attention and some of that spotlight off of the players, somebody that's going to be able to walk into a post-game press conference. Chicago's a tough media market, handle that tough media market, and just sort of command the room. And I think Luke Richardson actually did that part of it pretty well. And I feel the noticeable difference since his departure with Sorensen, because he reminds me, not for the same reasons, but sort of the way that Jeremy Colleton handled media appearances. It was never anything good. It was always just some bland stock kind of quote about something, and the attention shifts back to the players. I would like there to be somewhat of a big personality with this next coach. Maybe not Torts level, because you said he's going to make Connor Bedard cry, and I will never forget that. But someone that's been there, done that, is going to command that respect and is going to be someone that can help lead the team in multiple different facets. not a no experience NHL head coach. Someone with experience, please. That is my number one bullet point on my wish list.
Yeah, man. And real quick, just to add on what you're saying about like the yelling and stuff, like you don't you don't need to yell to make your point across, and like that's going to come across as fake if a coach is forcing it. And I think
Right.
with Richardson, we've seen it where like he can make his point across without having to yell, and it's probably because the dude's like the Crimson Chin, and he's pretty intimidating. But
Mm-hmm.
like we need somebody like that, and like the unfortunate reality, like you said, where Anders Sorensen could be like the biggest hockey genius in the world. When you're at such a high level, like the NHL, every little tiny detail matters, not just from like being an athlete where like the tiniest thing's going to throw off your game, like what sticks you use, what you ate for breakfast, but that goes for like leadership as well. Like unfortunately, like the personality is a part of it, and if you don't have like a little bit of that personality, that is something that's working against you as a head coach in the NHL, and probably in any professional sport, I would argue. But yeah, I think Davidson needs to go get somebody with experience, except for one person, my boy David Carl. He's the only one that I would be very happy with no experience. But I like without any of the coaches that have experience. Is there anybody that you think Kyle Davidson would go after, like maybe Mike Sullivan or somebody else who might be available?
See, I can't get a good read on this right now. I think we need to get to the point where playoffs are happening within the time period to know who's going to be available. Obviously, right now you can make your guesses on who might be moving, who might be in, who might be out. Um, Sullivan's a name right there, uh, but I definitely think that it's way too early right now to sort of build your list even. I'm sort of mad that we've gone this long with an interim coach, but I also understand where Davidson's process is, and I don't think they're looking at this for another 3 weeks, man, potentially. Once the season wraps up, then you start to build your list. So I think it's kind of hard. There's always sometimes a surprise that's out there. Somebody let go. Even a playoff team that doesn't make it as far as they're supposed to. Things happen, and I don't think that they can really look at this effectively right now. Obviously, one name, David Carl. I think it may have been advantageous for the Blackhawks if they are interested in him to bring him in and have some conversation. Um, just talk about where numbers are, or at least reach out to the agent and say, hey, we're expressing some interest in your client, and at least get some things staged there if that's a name that they want to interview. But for anybody that's in the NHL coaching right now, experience wise, I think you kind of don't know what's going to be available until final decisions are made after the conclusion of the season. And depending on if there's a name that may come available that's a Blackhawks target that they've identified that's in the playoffs, you're still behind the eight ball there. So I wanted to be aggressive out of the gate because I think it's going to need to get done well ahead of the draft, well ahead of free agency. Knowing who that coach is going to be and giving them all summer to work is going to be important. But I don't have a name for you, Steve. I mean, I know you've tossed the name Mike Sullivan out. It's really hard for me to evaluate who might be out there at the moment.
Yeah, and like I mean, Sullivan's not even like a total like a possibility right now, and he's another coach that's just been like one of those names that's been around the league for so long. But like you said, like I'm kind of in this like somebody was mentioning in the Twitter post that I posted, like Mike Sullivan. I think that was like the only name that was thrown out. Like I don't know who else. Somebody jokingly said Q. Like I don't think Q wants to
I don't think
go to a
that's
team like this.
I
So
don't think that's
yeah.
happening, unfortunately. But
Yeah.
no,
It's not even just
sorry
the
about
fact that
that.
we're rebuilding.
No,
um, yeah, but I don't know. It's kind of tough.
that's the problem too, though. Is I think that the Hawks are a little. They sort of, I don't want to say mismanaged this. However, if and this is what doesn't add up to me, Steve. If Luke Richardson's performance was so subpar and Kyle Davidson believed that by getting rid of Luke Richardson, he could speed up the timeline of the rebuild, because that seemed to be sort of the reason, right? Because you don't fire a rebuilding coach because you're losing. That doesn't happen. Like, it has to be so bad that people are that fed up. And I think it's a byproduct of Chicago sports in general right now, where people are that fed up. But the timeline doesn't make sense to me. You get rid of Luke Richardson, but now you're sort of at this crossroads, and this is like, just in real time as we're talking, you're saying it's going to be hard to get a established vet coach to come in here because of the stage the rebuild is still at. So shouldn't the guy who was coaching the rebuild team sort of just stay with it until you're actually trying to compete for that playoff spot? Was his messaging like overly that bad and bringing things down? I didn't really see that from the players, at least expressing anything or issues with Luke Richardson's system. There wasn't anybody speaking out saying, outside of fans and fanalists and podcasts and stuff like that. I never saw anybody out there from the Blackhawks saying like, "Oh, Luke's or throwing the coach under the bus." Normally, you get some sort of like leak out that someone was frustrated with a lineup decision or a strategy. Never saw any of that. It was just the Hawks are losing. We need to fire Luke Richardson. We're not going to make it better. We're going to bring up an AHL coach, and now we're going to go do this coaching search. You're going to have to lock someone in unless you're just doing an interim coach role here. And I don't think that that's the best thing to do for Connor Bedard or some of the other young kids, is to bring in another new, inexperienced rebuild coach. I don't think that that's how you set them up for success. So I think that it's very important they get this right, but I think it's a little bit harder than what we all think it's going to be, because I don't know if the options are going to be incredibly vast, and there may be other people looking for some of those experienced coaches that are on a quicker timeline to Stanley Cup contention than the Chicago Blackhawks will be.
Yeah, man. And you kind of bring up a good point with Richardson. When he got fired, I think a big part of that was because the way he was playing, it was really boring defensive hockey, which sucked to watch. But most importantly, you saw a system that wasn't producing for Bedard. So I think with your star player, like just not producing points, I mean, I remember at the start of the season, there was a lot of talk about like, wow, like this is a huge sophomore slump. And as once Bedard started getting rolling again, that kind of disappeared. I remember seeing a lot of like, oh, Bedard's a bust, and like that would piss me off. But I think Kyle Davidson, I'm just speculating. I think he had some pressure from the ownership, even though we never really hear from him from Wirtz. I think he had some pressure, and I think it may have been like a knee-jerk reaction, which leads me to like, I wonder how much communication he has with his head coach. Because like Davidson seems to be like a pretty hands-off guy where, I mean, like, I'm just piecing things together. He got Teuvo Teravainen, it looks like, to play with Connor Bedard. Teuvo is a two-way player. He's a pass-first winger, and we never see him with Bedard. So, like, I mean, I've never been in hockey management, but if I was the GM, I would maybe throw, like, something like, hey, like, head coach, like, we got this player to play with Bedard. Why, like, what's going on? And, like, maybe if I got, like, a explanation, then we could move forward. but I don't feel like there
You
was
are
any
going to hunt for
communication.
that. You're going to hunt for that explanation for the next few years. I feel like it's not
Yeah.
coming anytime soon.
No, but like I don't think there was any communication between Richardson and Davidson. I don't know if Davidson really laid out like what he wants to see with the lineup, and then Richardson at this point coaching to save a job because he knows like this is his last year with that option year at the end of his contract, but he's going to play the most realistic way to win, which was that boring style he's playing. So then Kyle Davidson pulls a plug on him, brings in an AHL head coach, places his assistant GM down in Rockford, who I don't know if you saw Scott Powers' interview. It's like he's never coached before, and he's very like open and candid about like how he's learning on the fly, which makes me question like the AHL, which technically isn't a developmental league, even though a lot of people want to say it is, if that is so important to your players' development, why are we just winging the head coaching down there? I don't know. Do you got any thoughts on that?
That is an interesting thought piece here because I feel the exact same way. It's almost you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you're not really paying him anything, right? You bring up and I thought that Sorensen is a good enough head coach to do AHL. Like that's perfect. And it seemed like a lot of the young kids did enjoy playing for him and still do as they've made their way to the Chicago Blackhawks roster. But on the same token, you've taken away that person who understands Rockford's system, what they're doing down there, started the year with all of the, I'm sure, just like every other job out there, here's your goals, here's what we're trying to work on, here's the development plans for all these guys. That was the man who was in charge of all of this stuff. Now you have somebody winging it there, and then you've got your NHL head coach as an interim AHL guy who is probably also deer in headlights. Wow, this is a huge change from an AHL schedule to the travel and the just the brighter lights of the NHL compared to the AHL. So I almost wish that they had made some sort of other move to pull someone in, keep Sorensen in Rockford, and just bring someone else in because it is, and I'm in full agreement with you. It is important. The AHL Rockford Ice Hogs development is very important this season. That's where a majority of your prospects are right now that are going to matter to this the big club in 2 to 3 years. So I don't want to say that it's gone wrong. Rockford seems like they've done okay this year, if you've looked at the standings. But it just begs the question of like how much of this was just a tightrope act the whole entire year, and what other things, and I don't want to start thinking bad thoughts, but like what other things can go wrong from that? It's your mind starts to go. But that's a good question. How do you feel about it?
Like, I think, I mean, I don't want to read too much into it just because I think things are just going to end up okay. But like those type of things that happen are stuff that I think the fans need to think more about because they could be like, maybe they are red flags, but there's something like we shouldn't just like brush it off just because it's a rebuild. We should just be patient and wait. Like these are things that like could indicate to other problems. Now, like no GM's perfect. They're gonna make mistakes. So I guess like if this was a fumble on his part, how does he move forward? And like a big part of that for me is I'm gonna see how he handles the next round of free agents because I thought he kind of dropped the ball last summer. So I would hope he kind of addresses that. And Davidson seems like a smart guy. So
Now
I think that
you weren't on the show at this point, but I have to ask you, where did he drop the ball in your opinion?
so I think, I mean, I remember the free agency day. Like when I saw Tavo, I was ecstatic just because of who he is. Tyler Bertuzzi at the time was like, okay, cool. And the one that kind of made me raise eyebrows was TJ Brody, because that was an extra body who has been right now. He hasn't played an NHL game in like who knows how long. But so like at the time, I honestly thought Davidson did good. I thought it was going to help him achieve his goal of not finishing bottom 3 or 5 or whatever. But to see how things turned out is kind of like, all right, well, clearly the players you got didn't hit the mark. Like mostly Brody. Martinez he's broken. Yeah.
Fair enough. I was just curious. But no, I think you're right. I think you do need to question some of these things. I think it's healthy to question some of these things. We could be excited for the direction of stuff, but I think it's always good to keep just evaluating stuff, and it doesn't even have to mean that things are inherently good or inherently bad. But getting the full picture around what's happening is always the goal here. I mean, that's why we spend this time to talk about it. Speaking of things that need to get talked about before we get out of here, we're about 52 minutes. We're probably going to blow past the hour on this one, but that's all right. We can give a little bonus for feathers time here, Steve. The goaltending has been horrendous over this last stretch of games. We were talking about this a little bit before. I saw a stat yesterday that's the worst goaltending in the NHL since I believe it was March 12th. You have to go back all the way, and this is kind of hard to believe. You have to go back all the way to March 10th. It was the last time the Chicago Blackhawks, and this was in a game against the Colorado Avalanche. They didn't score in this game, but at least they held their opponents to under 4 goals. It was the last time the Hawks only gave up 3. That is not good. Goals against since then, 4 to the Sharks, 6 to the Canucks, 6 to the Seattle Kraken. Actually, no, there was a 3-goal game on March 20th against the Kings, so I did find one in there, Steve. And then 4 to the Blues, 4 to the Flyers, 5 to the Devils, 5 to the Golden Knights, 5 to Utah. This is, I don't want to say it's concerning, but that stretch is not good. Arvid Soderblom, obviously something that we talked about a lot in the first half of the season, was a very, I mean, at a certain point, I thought maybe he's like, if we're going to do end of season awards on this show, he could be your turnaround player of the year. Still might be your turnaround player of the year. I think there's a couple other guys that probably more deserving at this point. But for a while, he was arguably your number 1 starter in goal, was having a much better season than he was when he was Swiss cheese last year. Enter Spencer Knight, a guy that when he was acquired by the Chicago Blackhawks had not given up more than 3 goals, dating back all the way to calendar year 2024. I believe it was like a stretch from December 28th all the way until, oh God, somewhere in this bad stretch of goaltending. What's going on? On our last show, I feel like I kind of cursed something. I said Spencer Knight's new mask is not doing him any favors. I feel guilty now because it's not looking good, and I don't know what we need to do to fix it. Just what are your thoughts on what's happening in that? Is it leaky defense? Is it actual poor goaltending? I can't seem to put a finger on it. It just feels like there's been a couple of fluke goals each game that you normally wouldn't give up. You saw one the other night. I believe it was Knight in net where you took one off the shoulder and it bounced and dribbled in. That one sticks out to me as like, why do we need that type of thing happening to us? I don't want like the bad Blackhawks stuff rubbing on to Spencer Knight or putting a damper on what was a pretty good season for Arvid Soderblom, but these numbers are starting to creep back towards not good. Steve, what's going on with the goaltending?
Yeah, it kind of like bums me out to see Soderblom kind of dipping a little bit because, like you said, when the first more than half the season, he was like not just like good, he was excellent. And I was ready to, and I did. I put the Swiss cheese meme like away, and I was like, that's in the past. But after yesterday, I'm ready to bring it back out just because like he did like let in a lot of bad goals. He had I think 10 he saved 10 shots that were a result of a rebound. And that was something he struggled with last year, was his rebound control. So it kind of was like these hauntings of like these demons he's like faced in the past. But like I'm not ready to be concerned or worried just because like for Soderblom, Blom, whatever, he's still young. He still has like a lot of time to develop his game. And I think I'm going to take more encouragement from how he has turned things around for the majority of this season. And like for Knight, he's also still super young. And I think what we're seeing is just a combination of bad puck luck. Both goaltenders are going through a slump. And then you compound that with a very inexperienced defense where they're either screening the goaltenders and those weird like bounces are getting past them because they just can't see them, or like they just get wildly out of position. And we're going to see more of that just because players like Levchinov have to learn, and that's just the nature of the beast right now.
Fair enough. I think the puck luck, as you mentioned, is not been great for the Blackhawks. On top of that, I've also got to throw out there it's a very young defense, and while I think Frank Saravalli called it an embarrassment of riches, it's also an embarrassment of youth as well there. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take a little bit of work to get it up to the level that it needs to be. Hence why you said next year's probably not going to be that great. However, I still think Spencer Knight has incredible instincts, just raw talent in goal. He looks very polished. I would hope that we can get off of this little schneid. We might need to bust out that Swiss cheese meme. Maybe a little tough love for the goaltending is warranted here. I'm sick and tired of seeing 4 or 5 goals. They seem to come in bunches too. And I don't know what the Hawks' problem is with this, but it feels like over the last week, 2 weeks, I don't know about you, but feels like 1 goal, 2 goals, 3 goals in like the span of a minute. And that has just completely taken the Hawks like the wind out of the sails. It feels like it's impossible to stop that bleeding and turn it back on and get into these games again. This was definitely the case against Utah Hockey Club. Terrible name. Had to throw that out there. But I mean, you're up 2-1, and next thing you know, it's 4-2. That can't happen. And soft goal, bad puck luck, whatever it is, they got to do something to slow this down after they give up a goal and just get puck control again, because you can't give up these massive game swings the way the Hawks are doing. And I do place some responsibility on the goaltenders for not stepping up in there and making some of those saves, because you do need a goalie to steal you some wins sometimes. And we haven't seen that from the Hawks over the last 2 weeks. So not good goaltending, Steve, just not good goaltending. And I don't like it because I'm a big fan of good goaltending. We're going to have to turn that around, and it's not going to be easy against the upcoming opponents in the Colorado Avalanche and the Washington Capitals, who come to town on Friday. Steve, I don't know. Are we doing an Ovi watch? What's going on with Ovi? Where are we at?
I think Ovi's got 5 goals to go, and I think between now and Friday, I'd have to look for the schedule, but he's got, I think,
pull
1
up the
game
Capitals
away.
schedule while we're
okay. And so I think, I mean, man, you got to think he does add a little bit close to it. I don't think he gets 5 by the time that he comes to, or we go to Washington D.C. But I think, man, he's probably going to get like maybe a goal in each of his next 2 games. Maybe he's going to get really close.
So they've got the Bruins tomorrow. They've got the Hurricanes on Wednesday, and then they've got the Chicago Blackhawks. So 5 goals could happen in that span of time. So this is interesting, and I want to ask you this question. Which goaltender do you put out against the Washington Capitals on Friday night, knowing that there's a potential that, say, Ovi gets 2, 1, 3 goals over the next 2 games and really only needs 2 to go against the Blackhawks' young defense? It's going to be ripe for the picking on Friday night. It's going to be interesting. Which goaltender are you going with? If you're Anders Sorensen, do you want Spencer Knight to be remembered as the goalie, or do you hand it to Arvid Soderblom and say, "Good luck, kid. Get out there and don't get remembered in history." That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I think. The Hawks are due for some puck luck to go their way. So I think one of the two are going to get hot during this week, and Sorensen is going to ride the hot hand and play whoever that is. And I think that Spencer Knight will probably be the one, just because I think right now Soderblom is kind of just going through Swiss cheese mode right now, and that might take the end of the season to snap him out of it. But I'm going to go with Spencer Knight.
You're going with Spencer Knight? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be Spencer Knight as well. Definitely don't want to see history against the Hawks, although, that's not really something that we can control at this point in time. It's really going to matter how Ovechkin plays these next 2 games, but he's Ovechkin, and things can happen. I wouldn't put it past him to potentially go get 3 against the Hawks and do it in grand fashion.
I want to say, didn't he pass Gordie Howe against the Hawks too, a few years ago? I want to say I remember seeing that.
I am not positive, but the Google machine could probably tell me when he passed Gordie Howe. It looks like 802. That was, I don't think it was against the Hawks. He might have tied it against the Hawks.
Okay.
No, that was December 23rd, 2022. It looks like he got it in Edmonton, but I'm not positive. I'm looking at a YouTube clip up there. Man, 802. Yeah, that was actually it was against Winnipeg. It was against Winnipeg. Sorry, there we go. Found it.
Okay.
802 was Winnipeg. So we weren't embarrassed on that one. But this milestone seems a little more important than the Gordie Howe milestone. If we're
for sure,
if we're being honest,
100%.
It's gonna be interesting to see. Steve, I know I stole your ruffle some feathers earlier. I'm not sure if you came up with another one, but I don't have a ruffle some feathers off the top of my head right now. Did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up for a ruffle some feathers segment?
I think Nolan Allen's stand down and that doesn't count because we don't have any more call-ups. So I'm just gonna stick with I think Rinzel should stay in the NHL. Don't send him to Rockford. There's no point.
I like it. Stick with it. And then it's time to get to some predictions. I know we were already talking a little bit about this Washington game, but this is the week ahead, as I mentioned a little bit ago. Avalanche on Wednesday night. That's an 8:30 start in Chicago. So it's a late night of hockey at home. And on the road on Friday against the Washington Capitals. Obviously, the big storyline there is going to be Ovechkin. And then Sunday, one of those, it's not a great 6 o'clock start, but it's an okay 5 o'clock start. Sunday, April 6th against the Pittsburgh Penguins. I should be in attendance to that one. I'm hoping that I can bring home a win. They also play the Penguins again on that Tuesday on the road. They'll be traveling with Pittsburgh back to Pittsburgh for back-to-back against home and away back-to-back against the Penguins as the season starts to wind down, Steve. We only got a couple more of these. I'm pretty sad that we're near the end of the schedule. Any predictions? We'll just go with this this 3 slate of games here, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday, are your predictions for the Chicago Blackhawks?
So I think against the Avalanche, they're going to do that thing where they just somehow beat a team that's better than them. They did beat the Avalanche back in January 3-1. I think they're going to do something similar. I think Friday against Washington, they're going to make, or not even make, they're going to be a part of history as Ovechkin gets closer to his chase. I think they'll lose that game. And then I think on I hate to say it, but just because they play so bad against these other bad teams, I think the Penguins are gonna beat them. Crosby just won a game for the Penguins like a night or two ago, so like I don't know. I think they're gonna go 1-2 for this stretch.
1-2 sounds very reasonable. I like 1-2 as well. I'm hoping that win comes against the Penguins because I'm going to be in attendance. I might be there against the Avalanche as well. We'll see. But I'm due for a win. I had a good little streak going earlier on in the season, and now it's not looking so hot. So I want at least one. I'm going to take that win against Pittsburgh. Should be a good Sunday night game. I think that the Capitals are going to be just a little too strong for this inexperienced Blackhawks young defense, and we could see some ugly numbers on Friday. Wednesday, I think we play a tight game. Maybe it's an overtime loss, Steve. I'm not positive, but I'd like to squeak that one out. But they have played Colorado pretty decent over the past stretch here. I know they did get shut out by them. I think that was the only time they've been shut out this season. So looking for a little bit of revenge there. But I'm going to ride with you on the 1-2 in this stretch. Steve, it's been an excellent show. You got any final thoughts before we get on out of here?
Quick stick taps to Pat Maroon. Dude's awesome for the locker room. Other than that, let's go Hawks.
Yes, obviously. Stick taps to Pat Maroon. We didn't even get to touch on that. I'll just round that out with he did make his announcement that he'll be retiring from the NHL. That was the game in St. Louis. Great ovation for him there. He got in a fight in that game. Has been dropping the gloves a little bit more. I want to see a couple more big rig fights before the end of the season. So I echo you, and stick taps to Pat Maroon. Steve, excellent show. Make sure you are following Four Feathers Pod on X at Four Feathers Pod. You can follow Steve at Dirty Third 81, myself at Tony on Tap, and our site at On Tap Sportsnet. Sure, you're going to ontapsportsnet.com for all of your Blackhawks coverage. Steve, you've been killing it over there as well. And that's all the time we have for today. Let's go Hawks.
Let's go Hawks.